Chair. Today in attendance, we have Bob Perkins, Mark Siegenthaler, myself, Elliot Thompson. Those are the three current Harbor Committee members. First item of order.
Richard is he's a
That's true. Yes, I'm sorry. And I was thinking of voting members. Richard Stetson, ex officio, is also in attendance. There are 4 committee members here today. Public comments on non-agenda items. I have one. The Harbor Committee is short on members. We're down 4 seats, 4 people right now. I hope that there are individuals in the town of Camden who have great enough interest and appreciation of the harbor and its value to the community, and they are willing to step forward and apply for consideration by the select board.
Notice I got was you and I are up for renewal in June.
Yes, that's right.
Well, that would make meetings much easier for me. I could just go to the kitchen table and call it a meeting.
That's right. Okay, we can consider that.
And put Sophie and Stephanie on the Zoom wall.
Okay, very good. Okay, so, Sophie.
No, but I think, if I remember correctly, our last conversation last month, my understanding is that we decided delaying recruiting new members until we came up, and by we, I mean the members of the Harbor Committee and myself, we came up with a better plan on the role and responsibility for the Harbor Committee, because all of you voiced some frustrations over the past few months of how the work of the Harbor Committee has been going. And so I think it would make sense if we had the next Harbor Committee would be like a working session of what you think, what you would be interested in working on as the Harbor Committee. Because I think once we have an offer like that, it'll be easier to attract people so they would know what it entails being on the Harbor Committee beyond enforcing the Harbor Committee ordinance. Because I think there is appetite to work on specific topic on harbor resilience or on, the speaker we have today. So I would really love if we could find time to think it through and maybe use the next meeting of the committee to do that.
Okay.
I actually think that's perfect, because I was going to say, let's not have a meeting in June because we got nothing to do. But if we actually, and I don't think it's just us. I just had someone sort of buttonhole me yesterday about, you said you only do what the select board asks you to do. And it's like, well, with the exception of a few designated things like benches, we don't have specific tasks. We are asked to advise when there's a question. So I think It's more than just what do we want to do. I think the select board has to decide whether they value this process and what we can do to make their process better. And I think Josh Moore was talking at the last meeting he was here about the resiliency type stuff of getting a conversation going so that it's manageable, and then present something to the select board that they might be acting on. But I honestly don't want to waste that time, because we want to do something if the select board doesn't view us that way.
Okay.
And I think, in the past, there hasn't been very good coordination on the expectations of what the Harbor Committee would do from the select board. So I think that also warrants, better collaboration and clarification, for sure.
Okay. Mark, do you have any comment on that?
No, I agree with it all.
Next meeting? And while we're talking about the next meeting, I'd like to schedule that now. Janice has informed me that June 11th, which is the second Tuesday.
He's a loser.
Is not good.
Loser, yeah.
Something else going on that day in town.
Yeah, something not very important.
Yeah,
You know.
right. So, 18th, then the following Tuesday, June 18th.
That's probably fine.
Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, I guess might be having second thoughts about that because June is when the select board will be appointing new members.
That rarely happens in June. That often
No.
makes it,
Not necessarily.
No,
I would think it'd be later than that.
it's often in July.
July.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Well, are you equivocating because
Is-
you
is
don't
someone
know if
taking
you want to
minutes?
be resentenced, or do you,
We'll be talking about that.
No,
We're
it's,
having a meeting with no minutes so far. But
Well, I mean, one of the issues is that I mean, as much as I'm hoping to be reelected, I'm not sure that I will be on the 18th. So if you want to have this work session with me, which I would love to do, we could probably look at the week before. But on the 18th, I don't know if we'll have. I mean, for sure, we'll somebody from the select board will be your liaison, whether it's me or someone else. But it's up to you.
I kind of have mixed emotions about that. I mean, if we're gonna have a whole new group of new members, it would be nice to have them all involved in the work session. And, so everybody's on the same page. I don't know.
I could see it as a two-stage process that we and Sophie and Stephanie have been observing for the last 6 months. And so starting that conversation is a good idea, but I don't think that conversation can end without involvement of whoever the going forward harbor committee is or going forward select board is. But I think that if we just wait until July or August and then start with people who haven't been directly involved, I just think it's harder to get it going without history.
Yeah.
It's also, I mean, it won't be just a one session. I don't think we can, hash it out in one session because there's so many things going on in town.
Stephanie wanted to talk.
Yeah, hi guys. I was just wondering, I know that Steve Gold put in a application. Do you have any others right now that have been brought forth that you know of?
The applications aren't submitted to the harbor committee.
Okay, so you haven't had an
I have
update
no idea.
other than
Nobody.
No,
Steve
because
saying?
Because we didn't really put a call for application just yet, Stephanie, remember?
Yeah, I understand that, but I know that people, at least like Steve, has put in his application and has been attending. It might be worthwhile to think about reviewing at least those and appointing a few more people. I mean, being 4 down, that's a pretty steep hill to climb, and putting off individuals that are interested could be seen as a deterrence in the future.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
And Stephanie, my suggestion is, I mean, we need individuals that have a lot of experience in the harbor and know what goes on. Not people that just think it's going to be a kind of a nice place to hang out.
I agree.
I mean, I know Brad also from Two Harbor Marina is interested. I spoke with him.
So I think that first conversation, I think it sends a weird message to be soliciting and hoping, but some people are already in. But that doesn't mean that when we have this next meeting to discuss it, that we don't essentially have the floor open to anyone who's interested enough to come and express an opinion. They don't have to be an official member of the harbor committee to be part of the conversation.
Okay, Sophie, so do I understand, do you feel that this working session should be separate from a regular harbor committee meeting?
Or it could be the next regular committee meeting, as you prefer. But I think we need to dedicate one of the meetings to this at least. So, and it could be either June 11 or June 18, well, not June 11, but June 18th or before June 11, whichever way you want to do it. And if you want to make it a public, kind of open up to the public, say, hey, we're having this working session. We're looking for public input on the harbor committee. And we encourage potential candidates to attend. I think we could organize that too.
Okay, well, then next meeting.
I could be
And Richard?
perfectly happy with June 4th, the week before the 11th.
I'm not here.
You're not, okay.
I'm in
Well,
California until Thursday. I fly home on Thursday, June, whatever it is, like 6th or
Sixth.
so.
yeah,
So, and I wouldn't want to be doing it early morning, Friday morning, when I don't even know if I got home the night before.
Richard, do you have a conflict with the 18th?
no, they just were the potential change in the select board and keeping things moving here.
Uh-huh,
But-
okay.
With
What about
that week of the 4th,
What about the 10th? The
I could do the day before or day after the 11th. Either one would work. I don't think I'd have a problem with either one of those. 10th or 12th. 12th is the open town meeting day, which
Right.
may or may not be a problem.
Town meeting day is June 11th only.
Oh, right.
10th, the 11th.
Okay, next meeting, June 18, the agenda will be Harbor Committee goals, expectations,
18?
18th, June 18th. And that is a Tuesday, can someone confirm that?
Yes.
Uh-huh, okay,
My arithmetic still works well.
all right, very good. Okay, next item, Sophie.
Yes.
Regarding the process for Lyman Morse Dock Extension Project Review. The ordinance describes that the Harbor Committee submits its comments to the Select Board. Following that, the Select Board, after a public hearing, shall either approve with conditions, or disapprove the proposed project. And then further, if approved, I'm looking for the planning board's involvement here.
I thought our comments went to the planning board and then all our stuff went to
It
the
says here,
select.
the Harbor Committee shall convene a meeting, review and comments of the Harbor Committee shall be in writing, shall specifically address the standards in Article 6, and shall be forwarded to the Select Board. Then, if approved, their approval shall be in writing. This is approved by the Select Board and shall not be effective until approved by the Planning Board under site plan review. So has the Select Board taken the action described in the ordinance?
Well, we haven't received your comments
Why don't we do those comments right now?
because
We have
yeah,
a comment
and remember-
document has to be submitted in writing.
Well, I think that correct me if I'm wrong. The train track our comments were writing on got misdirected to the planning board instead of directly to the select board. But those comments were addressing those standards and we can easily put them on the right track to go to the select board.
That's true. They can be sent today. Sophie, do you know if the planning board is planning on having a discussion on this project this week?
I don't,
do.
but I'm trying to get
I believe there's
Jeremy.
a planning board meeting Thursday.
Planning board meeting is Thursday at 5 o'clock, and on their agenda is site plan review for the Lyman Morse project.
Okay, did you
Well, I
hear?
guess, yeah, I heard that. I'm trying to get Jeremy to join this meeting because I stopped by his office and asked for those clarification, and he was supposed to share them with the Harbor Committee. So, hold on a sec, okay?
I hear a door.
We could just
We
yell.
could,
No,
yeah,
I
we
just heard
could
the door.
speak a lot, we could.
I
speak-
predict Jeremy within nope, it's someone else within 8 seconds.
So yeah, on the planning board, they do have the Lyman Morris project on their agenda to speak about. I'm not sure what their exact points are because the agenda doesn't, give you the bullet point like that, but they do have the project on there. It could be helpful to have somebody from the Harbor Committee Zoom in and participate or be in the room when that happens.
Isn't it not supposed to happen if the select board hasn't held a public hearing? And how
Yeah.
much notification?
Can you say that one more time?
Microphone,
Excuse me?
microphone, please.
It's supposed to go to the planning board once we've had the hearing at the select board.
Correct. And my
it's not
question
supposed
now
to-
is, how long
ahead.
does it take for the select board, after they receive these comments, to schedule a public hearing? Because it requires a select board public hearing.
Yeah. It requires, well, usually, Janice is in the room, but usually it's a 7-day notice for public hearings, if I remember correctly. So,
Can we read that again? Because that's not what I heard. What I heard was the select board can't act until we have sent our comments to the select board and site plan review has occurred, then the select board acts.
Upon receipt of the review and comments of the Harbor Committee, the Select Board, after a public hearing, shall either approve with conditions, or disapprove the proposed project.
But where's the mention of the planning board in this process?
If approved, the
By the-
approval
by the
shall be
select-
in writing and shall not be effective until approval by the Planning Board under the site plan
Oh,
review.
okay.
So it's Select
Well,
Board,
so
Planning Board.
Here's where the confusion comes, all right? In the zoning ordinance, the application will be referred to the planning board for approval under the site plan review section of this chapter. The planning board shall obtain input from the Harbor Committee and may solicit information from the Conservation Commission. So we've got two different ordinances saying two different things.
They're conflicting.
That's where the confusion arises.
Now, we have created some written comments relative to Lyman Morse. Is
We
that
have,
correct? We
yes.
have. Can't we simply forward those to the select board right here and now?
there's no form for your comments or requirement. I checked with Jeremy. It can be in any form. So if you have comments, I would suggest that you send them to the select board, to me and to Jeremy, and
Sure.
ask us to take the next steps with the select board. I see no problems there.
Jeremy might have a copy, but
Jeremy has already received our comments.
I'm going to make a motion right now that we forward the comments that we previously put together to the select board under this ordinance. And then they can sort it out of where they are in the process. But it's clear that we need to put it on a track that lands at their door, not that lands on Jeremy's door without a specification. But we need to specifically say these comments are intended for the select board under the ordinance that Elliot just read.
Okay. Bob has made a motion. Any discussion on the motion? And if I'd like to restate it, send our comments to the select board right away.
Yeah, and cite the thing that asks us to.
Cite the code, okay? Uh-huh.
So
All right.
what's your email address?
sromana@camdenmaine.gov.
Camden.
Yeah, if you send it to me, I'll do it right away.
What's your email address?
sromana.
Sophie, your email address is
It's romano@camdenmaine.gov.
SROMANA.
It's right
Yeah.
there in our name tag to your left. I
Been
couldn't,
sent to you.
Excellent. I will forward it right away.
So do we abandon that motion? Seeing as the action has been taken?
No, we need to do that.
Got it.
Then, that's the effectuation of it. But we still need, because we were not
yeah,
voting
you-
about sending it to the select board. We were talking about sending it to the planning board because that's what everyone kept telling us we had to send it to
And that's what we did.
the planning
Says-
So
board.
you need, yeah, the three of you should vote.
We
I'm
make
sending
it
it-
official, and Sophie's gonna open her inbox and it's achieved.
And there it is, right? It may already be there, but yeah,
All
Tyler,
right. All those in favor? 3-0. Done deal. Okay, Sophie, you have our comments.
Yes, I do. I just saw them coming in.
Okay.
Typing the email right now.
Any further discussion on that topic? Moving on, minutes of April 16.
Superb. Move to approve them.
Second.
Discussion. I propose that we alternate minutes, seeing as we're down 4 seats, we don't have a vice chair, we don't have a secretary. I think the responsibility for the minutes should be shared by the remaining members. Discussion?
I think the ex officio member should do them.
I could see that one coming. I'm standing in the middle of the train track.
Yeah, the one thing we need to do is have, I found when I was doing it, I don't know if you found it, but the sort of having minutes come in a format that's compatible with the town and my computer so that I could enter stuff was completely ridiculous. So if we're gonna have 3 different people doing it, it's an issue to not have
Be
it
consistent.
come as, I mean, because there's a certain format, so you want to fill in the blanks for this particular meeting, and then when there's substance, then you write the substance. But I found that the process of having it come so that it could be printed out by someone in a coherent manner was not as easy as it should be.
So what is the format that you propose?
I don't know.
Just a Word document?
I have an
I
Apple
would-
computer, so I'm not, maybe that was the problem.
I would be happier with PDFs, to be honest with you.
Well, you got to create it and make it a PDF.
Well, yeah. Which,
You have an
We
answer?
have OneDrive, we have PCs, we don't have Macs.
Yeah.
So if you send it to me as a Word, I can create it to a PDF before it goes out, because that's what we do with everything. We don't send anything out in Word.
Right, but I don't think, so I think mine was being created in, well, Word's Microsoft, right?
Yep.
So,
Well, it's a
and I was
Microsoft,
using the Apple Pages or something.
Yeah,
Which nobody can open, I often find.
right,
Yeah.
I struggle with Pages. I can make it happen. That
Anyway,
generally
that's an
involves
issue.
another
And since
computer in our
I'm not-
console.
Up next,
This is all over my head, so I.
Mark's gonna have to figure out June.
Mark, you accept that? Yeah. Responsibility, thank you. Okay,
Janice will get it in the right form.
and we'll work out the format. Can you work in Word, Mark?
Directly.
Can you work in Word? Word doc?
He'll ask his
Doc,
grandchild.
dot doc.
I'm just gonna handwrite it.
Okay.
But it's not on an Egyptian tablet. It will be on a,
Okay, very good. So minutes of April 16, vote. Very good. Moving on, Harbor Master report. Harbor Master is not present at this time. Sophie, do you have any comments to share on, we've already talked on this really, the committee appointments. Do you have anything additional to say about that?
No, I think we've already,
so I'm not hearing you.
Address this.
Okay, thank you.
I saw Steve on the harbor and asked him to come to the meeting, so I have relayed the message, Elliot.
Well, I communicated with Steve multiple times about this meeting, and he just at 8 o'clock said that he had overbooked himself. So he'll show up if and when he can.
So this is the first item on next month's meeting agenda.
What's that? Harbor Master?
Not just the harbor master, just the idea of the message it sends that we are the last priority for the harbor master to talk to.
Okay. Very good.
Sorry to act
One,
fussy,
one,
but
one, backing up just for a moment to the harbor master report. The town has done some work on Steamboat Landing, the launching ramp. And it is more usable than it was a week ago.
Yeah.
which
right.
makes it how usable.
Well, I backed a small trailer down and it did bump a little bit, but nothing, no, only once or twice. But I think it was at high tide and I didn't have to go very far. But at least there aren't big concrete chunks hidden under the water a third of the way down. And
Good. Yeah, I used the ramp yesterday for a launch and it's very rough and there is damage to the asphalt on the uphill side of the ramp. And it's a big hole. Some people will have problems getting their trailers
but the
down.
trailer I had has 8-inch rims, so it's about the smallest wheels you'll find on most any trailer that ought to go over the road. So
Yeah, right. And then Steve has informed people that next month, sometime mid-June, there is to be the replacement of the concrete slabs with bigger
concrete slabs.
bigger concrete slabs. Okay. Moving on, at the last meeting in our discussion about the Lyman Morris project, I believe it was Sophie mentioned that it would be a good idea to have a conversation to include Lyman Morris, the planning board, the harbor committee, and the town planning department to make sure that the scope of work was understood and also the pertinent ordinances. And that has not been done. And I'm kind of wondering how that might happen and who would be the lead to coordinate that. And I propose Jeremy Martin, who's not here. That's easy for me to do. Sophie, do you have any comments on that?
No, I think it's a good idea. Jeremy is actually on his way back from Lake Beach. I think they were looking at the stairs. So he's going to join the meeting. I'm also texting with Audra at the same time, who might be able to fill in the gaps. So yes, I think Jeremy should be the lead on this because originally we had suggested to have a liaison from the harbor committee to the planning board to follow that process, to make sure that we wouldn't find ourselves in the situation where we are in, which is an unclear process and unanswered questions and collaboration or cooperation or
Here he is,
meetings that are not happening. Excellent, Jeremy. I was just talking about you.
direct from Lake Beach.
Just say yes, Jeremy.
So
Say yes.
So I think
We need your help.
What I
Um,
just saw is the harbor ordinance states that the Lyman Morris process is, it first goes to the harbor committee, then for review of the select board, and then back to the planning board. The zoning ordinance states that it goes from the harbor committee to the planning board, to the select board, which is the current path it's on now.
So I had reviewed this prior with Bill Kelly, and we did not view this as similar to piers and wharves and other structures that go through that same process, which is the process you referred to, Mark. These are just floats, seasonal floats, and I don't have the ordinance in front of me. But as I recall, it's just the harbor committee reviews it. There was no formal process, and I've laid that out in a memo prior to the harbor committee. There's no real formal process. It just, again, it's not in the same category as piers, breakwaters, wharfs, all that stuff. And so the harbor ordinance is fairly silent on it, except for the harbor master must approve it in writing. The zoning ordinance is the ordinance code that refers back to requesting comments from the harbor committee. And that's all it says. It doesn't say a formal process. And that's, the harbor committee looked at it that one time initially, and then we had the walkthrough, right, the site walk, and then you guys reviewed it again, and provided comments to the planning board.
See, I don't agree with a lot of that. A land-based float is a structure. And I thought we've changed the ordinance to make sure that
Yeah,
the land-based float was considered a structure and needed review.
Let me go back there. I hear what you're saying.
So, and the other thing is that the harbor committee, what they're asking for the comments from the harbor committee is for the harbor committee to actually review the harbor ordinance and comment on how it applies or doesn't apply to the harbor ordinance.
I'm not sure that's exactly right, but I hear what you're saying.
Jeremy, it's been a long time since I've looked at this, but
Yeah, me too.
I'm a little confused about the zoning ordinance and the planning board having a role under a zoning question.
It specifically says, and I can get
Okay.
that section for you. It specifically says, and then there are it also, the zoning ordinance other times asks for comments from the conservation committee, for instance, on some projects.
But I guess my question is what the planning board thinks it's doing. It thinks it's doing it under a specific part of the zoning law.
Yes, under the site plan review section. Yeah. And that is 290-12.1. I'm sorry, I'm doing this on my phone. Proposals to construct, enlarge, or extend piers, wharves, bulkheads, breakwaters, consolidated piers, causeways, marinas, bridges over 20 feet in length, and uses projecting into water bodies. And that's the provision that requires site plan approval. And then if you go to the approval criteria, maybe it's in the procedures. Sorry, I was not prepared for this. I was down at Lake Beach, but we've got temporary stairs on the way.
Nice ones too.
Yeah,
Yay,
Under procedure.
thank you.
hold on. What did you say, Mark? B?
2B.
2B. So 12.2B is applicants are encouraged to meet in pre-application. We've done that. What section, what B is that?
That's under procedures.
I wish there's so much stuff on this damn screen.
And the screen is so small. And my eyes are so bad.
Um,
Turn the lights up.
Using contract.
and I don't see that one. Is it in the approval criteria or site plan content? So I don't see that.
If you want-
It seems as though this would be the appropriate topic for this joint meeting with the planning board, the harbor committee, and Jeremy. I don't know if we're going to resolve it in this forum.
No, I don't think so. I think, and actually Bill Kelly's in tomorrow, so Bill and I will review this again, and go through it, taking Mark's points into consideration and review it again. Bill and I did do this, and again, we went through it. It's their seasonal floats, as how we were viewing them, and they weren't a pier, wharf, or breakwater or other type of structure that goes through that harbor committee process, the select board, and the planning board.
But my point is they are a structure.
That zoning ordinance also refers to marina. Now, whether this is a float or part of the marina, it's not, you know.
Yeah, we were looking at it as a use that's projecting into, and it's an expansion of a marina. So I think in that section, I think there were two pieces that would require that. That's how we were looking at it. So we'll get to the bottom of this afternoon and tomorrow. How's that? And then we can report back to you folks. I know it is scheduled to go to the planning board tomorrow on Thursday.
Thursday, yeah.
So we'll,
But the point is, I mean, we've already made our comment.
you did.
You've got a
Yep.
copy
Yeah.
of them.
Yep.
The planning board has a copy of them.
Yep.
Select board has a copy of them now. So,
So there's a timing issue there, Jeremy, because I just forwarded you the comments that the harbor committee made.
Uh-huh.
I sent them to you, Tom and Audra. And the select board, the confusion is whether the select board needs to approve or
Right. No, I get that.
those comments before they go to the planning board. So there needs to be better coordination in the process between the harbor committee, the select board, and the planning board. Because we don't want the harbor committee's comments not to be taken into account by the planning board Thursday night.
No, well, I hear you. The planning board was sent those harbor committee comments, I think, when the day Mark and Elliot sent them to us. So the planning board
Okay.
does have them. They've had them for a couple of weeks now.
Okay.
I think the question really is does this project require select board review as well? And Bill and I reviewed it and we didn't think it did. So we'll review it again. I think that's the only issue.
Okay.
That is in front of, I think that's the point Mark's making.
yeah.
So
Well, would you mind sending an email to the harbor committee,
Yeah.
the planning board, and at least Tom, Audra, and myself?
Sure.
So that everybody has the same information. I think what's difficult is that we weren't sure whether the harbor committee's comments had been sent, the comments or not, because none of us were CC'd on this or BCC'd. So if you can help us just clarify what the next steps are, making sure that everybody has the same information.
Sure.
And share the outcome of your meeting with Bill Kelly tomorrow, that would be really good.
Yeah, and we'll do that. And then
Yeah.
if need be, since the meeting was already, noticed and it's a public hearing, if we decide at the last minute now that there is another step that has to occur, we'll either continue the planning board meeting and then resolve that issue, or we'll go through the process, get the planning board to review, and then send it to the select board to review. I know there's there was some misunderstandings and some confusion in how the ordinance was previously drafted, and I thought I cleared that up last November.
So, you see, and that's the point.
Huh?
I think it's on track legitimately right now to go to the planning board because the zoning ordinance states that.
Mhm.
Okay, the harbor ordinance states different track. So I think
Yeah, I
I think
understand.
it's still okay for the planning board to review it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we've done our job at this point.
Yeah.
And that it's
Yeah.
gone both ways. And the thing that I would differ from Sophie, having had this many years ago, but cases involving this type of stuff, that the procedural details ahead of time are important, because if someone were, either Lyman Morse were to complain, or someone, an interested party were to complain and be appealing this, these questions would be ridiculously important about the timing of, so it's, should the planning board have heard it before the select board or not? And I think I would encourage you not only to get the opinion, but that if you think the select board doesn't need to be involved, I would have them confirm that they do, that's how they interpret it too. Because otherwise you end up with someone saying, well, sorry, but for a technical reason, you didn't go through the intersections in the right order, and now you got to go back and do it again.
Okay.
Steve's
Yeah,
got- we'll discuss that.
I agree with you.
Thank you.
I agree
Thank
with
you,
you, Bob.
Mr.
That's
Lawyer.
why I've been asking for a clear process from the onset. As those applications come through, I think we really need to have a very clear process from the beginning.
Yeah.
Um,
This one is one of those odd,
I know, I know, Jeremy. We've had this discussion, you and I. I
Yeah.
know.
I mean, these floats are a very different than again, the piers, breakwaters and wharves section. So I think that initially what I had sent to the harbor committee and sent around on the process as a memo before it first came here, I think that's what that was, laid out that process. If it was clear to us and to the town attorney that it had to go through that select board process, that memo that I drafted probably a month or two ago now would have stated that. But we'll review that again, Sophie, and get that back to you guys.
So for
Awesome. And
further clarification, Jeremy, is there an actual official application for this project?
Yes.
And is it for the overall scope of the project? Because Gartley and Dorsey's initial letter was that it's to widen the floats from a 6 foot to 8 feet. But it's already been approved. So, the overall project has already been approved, but they were presenting it as just widening the floats. So that's where we're completely confused.
I'm confused when you say that it's already approved. I just don't
It just came through 3 years ago.
Yeah, but approvals don't usually last.
No, it didn't, it
Forever.
never got approved, and I will say that Lyman Morrison, they're not here unfortunately, they can't comment on it, and Gartley Morrison can't either, but I think they muddied the water a little bit when they talked about, remember they mentioned that ordinance went to town meeting and got approved, and then certain sections didn't apply to marinas, right?
Right.
Well, I think
Those
the
kind
muddying
of
of the water
comments.
was bringing up the history as if there's nothing to see here because we've been through this, but now we're bringing it back. Well, if it wasn't an existing approval you could act on, then that,
There was no approval, I guess is what
even
you're
if there
saying.
was,
Even if there
don't you
was,
have
it
to
doesn't.
work, get it
Correct.
done within a year or it
Correct.
evaporates?
You're right.
Yeah.
Exactly. It never went through this process that we're going through now, even though they said it got approvals. It never got approvals. It went through the procedures to facilitate what they're proposing. Like that's what went to a town vote, and that they kept talking about that. It was kind of odd to me.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. If this was approved prior and they never built it, that approval's null and void. And so this is a new approval.
Yeah.
We had to
Chair
get- we had to
recognizes
get approval
Stephen
from
Gold.
Congress to go further.
To help.
I'd just like to say that at a previous meeting, Josh Moore said that even if it were approved, this project is unlikely to be built this year. So in coordination with what Bill said in terms of doing it properly, I suggest we encourage the planning board to continue their process instead of going through a full site plan review at this point. I also just want to mention that, Jeremy, you keep saying floats, but this is actually the extension of a pier. these floats are attached to a pier.
Jeremy, the one question I had when you talk about structures. There is a definition, when you look through all the definitions, there's a definition of structure that essentially includes floats.
Bob, can you speak closer to your mic, please?
I'm sorry, the mic got
Thank you.
moved. What I was saying was that in the definitions, I think of the ordinance that Elliot was reading at the beginning of the meeting, there's a definition of structure that isn't like pilings and granite, but it includes, I forget the exact wording, but it includes floats of a sort as structures.
And piers, when piers are being approved, the whole review process of a pier includes the float and the ramp at the end of it. So.
Actually, it doesn't. If you remember the ones that came most recently to you folks, it was very much detailed that the harbor committee is reviewing the pier and not that float piece, even though they showed that float piece, and we can go back to those minutes. I remember that for sure, that is not part of the review on you guys. We've went round and round on this on a couple of pier applications. But I hear what you're saying, Mark. I don't think it's accurate. But we'll look at this. I'll look at this today and tomorrow with Bill, and then if the process needs to pivot into another place, we'll pivot it into another place. That's not a problem.
Sophie?
I would recommend though that if the harbor committee or like Steve, I can handle getting them to continue it based on kind of the legal stuff, but comments, it's like Steve, if you wanted to come and say you should continue it, I would recommend you do that. I'm just pointing that out. I don't want to be the only person saying this should be continued for X, Y, and Z. I think if the harbor committee and some citizens think it should be continued to resolve this issue, well, I think you should come and do that too.
Mark, are you able to attend this planning board meeting on Thursday and represent the harbor committee?
It's 5 o'clock.
I can also read a memo from you guys or comments from you, or if you've got something you want to prepare in the next couple of days, I can read that into the record from the harbor committee.
But I think what we really need is Jeremy, once you meet with Bill Kelly tomorrow, I think it's really important that you send an email to the harbor committee, the planning board, and the select board, and me, to make sure that we all have the same information. Because I think what's happening is that you're having conversations with all three entities, but there's not a common thread here. So it makes, and I understand they're moving pieces because of some definitions, of some interpretations of the ordinance and the zoning and things like that. So we need clarity, and everybody needs the same clarity and clarification. But I think really the next step is to really send that email after your meeting with Bill Kelly. I will do my best to attend the planning board on Thursday and share whatever information is available and make sure that we have a continuance from the planning board so that the process at the harbor committee and select board can take place according to the ordinance.
No worries.
So I think these are really the next steps.
That's fine.
Elliot, you were asking me a question.
I'll withdraw that question, Sophie. Mark, are you able to commit to that?
I have plans Thursday. That I really don't think I can get out of.
Okay, very good. Is that a physical in-person meeting?
It is, but there's a Zoom link for it.
Where is the in-person meeting? Right here at 5 p.m. I will attend that meeting.
There is on that agenda, there's a small Hannaford project that I think is before that one, that should go pretty quickly. So it might be about 5:30, Elliot.
Okay, Thursday, 5 PM start time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay, very good. Mark, I'll coordinate with you a little bit on preparation for that.
Okay.
Make sure
And
that
I'll reach out, I'll send you guys something as soon as I can tomorrow.
Okay, all right, very good. Does that conclude our discussion on the Lyman Morse project
I hope so.
for today? All right, very good. Jeremy, while we have your attention here, your request for proposals.
Yeah.
For resilience planning.
Yeah.
That document has been circulated. And I just wondered, I know you have a later in May submittal date.
Yeah.
Request for submittals. And I wondered if you have any comments or anything about that to share today.
When was this circulated?
I'll have to check, but in the last week.
No comments other than I have taken a few phone calls from firms that are interested to submit to it, which is good. If you guys, I don't know if you've listened to the select board meeting from last 2 weeks ago, or maybe it was last week, with Julia Hopkins from Northeastern spoke on the buoys, weather buoys that she has out there, and she's been looking at sea level elevations and storm surge and wavelengths and heights and all that stuff. We're going to try to incorporate. The timing's not perfect. She's trying to get some more data this year, but we're going to try to coordinate the consultant that helps us with this resiliency planning with Julia Hopkins, so that there's this kind of continuum of work going on in terms of resiliency planning.
And I'm not familiar with Julia Hopkins.
Julia Hopkins is a PhD. She's a doctor of oceanography, I believe oceanography, I don't know the title exactly, from MIT, who's a professor at Northeastern, who is working on modeling storm surges and sea level rise. And in particular, she's focusing on Camden Harbor. One of the things that this model does is, or will do, I would suggest you all listen to the select board meeting for that piece of it last week. It was really good. You'll be able to model eventually, say a breakwater or a living breakwater or a structure in a certain area. You can model and see what that type of structure would do to wave heights and storm surge as they're coming in, based on all the modeling that they're doing in Penobscot Bay and what she's doing in particular in Camden Harbor. So it's pretty interesting, and I wish it was a year or two prior to now, because then we could use a lot of that data for the harbor resiliency plan, but it's just happening the way it is. She's getting this privately funded. There's a group from Camden that is privately raising funds for that. So I would encourage you to, Jim Jordan, I think is his name. He lives over in the condos, and Phil Conklin is working on this as well. And Jim Bennett, unfortunately, you all know, passed away, but he was working on this with Julia too. So there was a group, and is still a group working on this with Julia.
So is she directly involved with the Penobscot Bay buoy system thing, or is she just utilizing that?
She's utilizing that, and she's got her own buoy now. She had 2 buoys in the harbor last year. There's one beyond Curtis Island right now. There was one near the ledges that got tossed in one of the storms that she's trying to replace right now, as I recall.
In your document, I noticed a term, living breakwater, and I'm not familiar with that. Well, what does that mean?
Well, I think people always have thought of breakwaters as these just rock structures that are placed out into a water body. They're building them now. Like Army Corps, I've been told that Army Corps and FEMA aren't even funding traditional breakwaters in locations much anymore. they're funding more of these living breakwaters, which is a combination of rock and gravel and sand and plant material, vegetation. all
So it
that,
creates a habitat.
to create the habitat and a buffer rather than just a solid wall.
Not just a pile of stones.
Correct.
Uh-huh. Okay, that's interesting concept.
Mhm.
All right, well,
Yeah,
thank
there's
you.
also non-permanent ones that do there's a lot of things happening in that area with lots of new technologies.
Yeah.
Non-permanent ones you can move around depending where the swell comes in and things like that. But the presentation that Julia gave was really interesting. Jeremy, thank you so much for reminding me of it, because I haven't had my coffee yet this morning, so I'm not firing on all cylinders yet. But it was really interesting to see how the inner harbor is protected and how Sherman Cove is protected from those big waves. And they're going to continue modeling and getting data. And one of the things they need to understand is the swell and the surge. And that would be very, very useful for us to understand how to adapt the harbor to those new weather conditions and how and surge and all kinds of things. So the model she showed us was the December 18 storm, December 18, 2023. And since then we had much stronger ones, but it's still a really good baseline for us as part of the evidence we're building on sea level rise in the harbor. So I really recommend that you guys watch the select board.
Yeah, and I will say,
So-
Chris Nolan asked about whether or not that model would be available to like the public. It was a good question. I think Julie had a hard time kind of understanding maybe the question and answering it.
Yeah.
The model is, I mean, this is like super whammy computers, right? That are modeling these things, taking a lot of information. It's nothing that we'll ever have on a phone you can pick up a phone and say, what's this going to do, right? If we do this, they will have this model available and all the data so that another scientist or marine geologist and people like that can, with their computers and their systems, use that model. So it's just not a one and done for the model, but it's not something that the public will be able to actually use necessarily. She's going to try to work with someone else at Northeastern in her group that is trying to bring some of these technologies onto smartphones. But it sounded like it was quite a leap to go from her modeling, which are using probably, computers that are very powerful computers, very different than using a smartphone.
Mhm. Okay, thank you for the comments.
Yeah.
Harbor Master report from Steve Pixley.
It's all good. Everything's good down the harbor. I don't know if you've had the chance to look at the brackets corner brackets that I made for the #1 float at Steamboat Landing. That was the one float that takes the brunt of it. And I had Billy Glover and him and I looked at, we designed it. And I think that that's going to, whatever we do with those floats next year, either give them to Curtis Island or bring them up to the head of the harbor for a new kayak float right up the Mary Day ramp. Whatever we do with it, I think we're going to get another 8 years out of them. And for their silver years, remember, this is their 24th year of service for the town, and they get.
So are you talking about all of them moving somewhere and a whole new set of floats?
All those floats, this is their last summer there because they're so old. And I budgeted for new ones to be made for next season. So we're going to put them somewhere. But that one, I was really nervous that this #1 float wouldn't even last this year.
Is #1 farthest out or nearest?
Closest in.
Yeah, okay.
So that's good. They're in. We cobbled together the old pavers. They're all broken and old, and it looks good. It's usable. We're looking. American Concrete is making us new pavers that are 2 tons a piece, much larger. And as soon as that comes in, we're gonna have to close that ramp for about four days, and the Public Works and me are gonna rip them up and put new ones in.
You have a time frame
What
for that?
happened to Tom Ford? I thought he.
Tom Ford was going to do a quick fix, but we decided we're going to go for it. FEMA gave us some money, and we're going to fix it right. And the time frame, unfortunately, we don't know when American Concrete, because of the storm, they're backed up. So I don't know when they're going to get this to us. I was hoping I'd have them by now, because we ordered them a while ago, but they kept calling saying we're backed up. So I've asked, and I've went on social media to tell people I could wait till November, do it then. But the key players were like, just do it. We can go to Rockport for 4 or 5 days, unless it's July, then I'm not going to do it, when it's in the heat of the season. But that's the only not perfect condition for me, is that everything else, the town floats looks good. I fixed some plumbing. We got some electrical issues. I ordered a new hydraulic motor for the Fishman winch, because that unfortunately got hurt again. That should come in the week. We'll fix that. We just finished redoing the area where the Public Works kind of ties in with Peter Ott's and Stuart Smith's area. We have it's going to look nice. We're going to blacktop it. I poured concrete. I built a new section of that ramp that goes up to meet his. Yeah, there's a nice new anchor. I was with Stuart and his son. I was like, why don't we take that anchor and show it off? It's been in the weeds for 30 years. And so we brought that front and center, built a little granite thing to put it on. A lot of mooring turnover this season. It's almost done. I've one finger float was given up. 2 inner harbor floats were given up. So if you have any questions, I could field them. But I mean, my staff is relatively the same. Sarah's not coming back, but I'm going to hire young Cedar Andrews, who is a grandson to Dee Dee Conover. He applied, and I said, they think you'd be great. He's going to basically take over her hours, afternoon hours. Doing a lot of work to the restrooms. They look good. Ordered some new heavy-duty dryers for your hands, because those didn't work anymore. So, yeah.
Steve, can you share comments on improvements to Curtis Island access?
Yeah, so Mr. Scaling is pretty hot into going out there. He's got some people out there looking at the assessing the damage. Well, I wouldn't say damage, but the condition of that building, and they're going to come up with here's what it's going to cost to get it so it doesn't turn any corners. And there was no way to get to the higher staircase, because the lower staircase at the beach had been blown away by the ocean. So I went out there 3 weeks ago and built a new staircase for him. Both the outhalls are in for dinghies. I think we took off about 20 bags of garbage and 3 old propane tanks. And he's got Rick Seibel, the ex Public Works director, helping him, volunteering and going out there. So things are getting done out there. Yeah.
Well, are there any plans for improving access for?
I mean, there's talk right now that maybe we take those old floats from Steamboat Landing and move them over there, mostly because of the need for the construction materials and people that will be hopefully in the next year and a half doing the things that they need to do to the lighthouse and the actual building structure and the barn. That it all needs work. So it's not formulated yet, but we are definitely talking about it. We've had meetings with the Scott brothers about possibly putting in a pier and then a float. It's all talk right now. It's all theory.
And I think the select board's going to have to weigh into on type of access for sure. That we're going to provide out there.
Because it definitely opens up how much since I've been here for 24 years, the big conversation of how much access do we want to the island? We want people to enjoy it, but if we start making it so it's really easy to get there, the next thing you know, there's Chapter T boats that want to take folks out there, and then you got to hire someone to manage it.
Nighttime parties.
Garbage cans, So, but then that's a great conversation, and I think we're going to have it pretty soon, because that's just the way it is. It's definitely been an island that's kind of like, it's everybody's. Good luck getting to it. And I don't know if we want to change it or not. That's a great conversation.
Any other comments for the harbor?
There is a foundation. I don't know if you all know too. There's the Friends of Curtis Island Light, or I don't know their exact name, but it's a nonprofit now that's raising funds to do restoration work there. Mike Scaling and Phil Conkling are involved in that. So just keep that in mind. We signed a memorandum of understanding, the town did with them. they're paying half the cost of the structural assessment that's going on right now, to all 4 buildings. There's 4 buildings, actually. There's a little fuel building, the barn, the lighthouse, and the house. So that's all being done currently. And I'm sure the link to that assessment will be up soon. We're supposed to have their final assessment, I think it was just about now, so mid-May, and they thought the cost estimates would be in early June to do repairs.
Okay.
The only other thing I could say is that my reservations for overnight dockage for the summer are probably about double that they usually are for right now. I'm pretty amazed. I don't know what's stimulating that, but so I think that's good news. It kind of bodes well. Another quick thing is the Inner Harbor float that I wanted to try to put in just north of the PG Willie, float number 1. Over the years, I've always thought we could fit another float there without impinging traffic, the flow of traffic. The biggest person was Mike from the Angelique, because he's got to make that little jog, because he comes in on the west side. He has to make that jog after the Day Sailor float, and where the Appledore is, and then he's got to watch out for the Grace Bailey's bowsprit, and then he's going to make another jog to his berth. And same with Dennis, who now took over the Angelique over the years. He's like, that's tough, Steve. I don't want to do that. But now that the Grace Bailey's gone and now the Mercantile's leaving in about 3 weeks, I said to him, I want to put it in. He said, go for it. I think it's doable now. But now I've got another person who drives a Day Sailor, not from the Day Sailor dock, but from a private dock, the Angica. He brought me out and was like, look how tight this is. And he brought me out there and I was like, okay, you got me. I mean, it would make it a little tighter, so I'm not going to put it in. The one thing I might do is I might think about, and I'll talk with you and bring you guys out there, is just past the Camden Yacht Club dock, the one that bends at the very end of the southern end, that just when you leave basically and merge into the outer harbor, those floats converge in. They follow the contour of the harbor. I might want to put one more as a spearhead right in the center that could be a town float that we manage. And the only reason we don't have one out there is because if you had 2 boats out there all the time and then you get your Southeaster, they're going to get the bejesus bashed out of them. But if it's me and my crew managing it, just doing overnight dockage, then when it's rough, we just don't put boats on there. Could have a sign on it that says, welcome to Camden, VHF Channel 16 Harbormaster, 71, VHF 71 is Lyman Morris, 68 is Camden Yacht Club, kind of like an informational kind of welcome, 5 mile per hour, save the whales, whatever you want. Anyway, that's what's in my mind.
Steve, how many windjammers will operate in Camden Harbor this year?
So for windjammers, you got the 3 at the head of the harbor, Angelique, Mary Day, and Louis R. French. As usual, beautiful vessels. And then at the town docks, you're going to have the Swift, the Captain Swift. And as far as windjammers, which are overnight vessels, that's it. Yep. For day sailors, you've got your 7 at our dock, and then you've got the Angica off the other dock.
So what did the windjammers used to be, number-wise?
We had
20 years ago.
We had 20 years ago, we had 7 with 3 and then 3, 6. We had 8 at one time, the Adventure and the Roseway. But yeah, it's dwindling.
So 4, did I understand that?
We've got 4 windjammers,
4.
overnight windjammers. Yep.
Angelique, Mary Day, French, and Swift.
And Swift.
And so the 3 of them are at the head of the harbor.
Yeah, exactly. The Library Park or head of the harbor.
Okay, 4. So does that mean there are 3 open slots?
Well, yes and no. Basically, no. I'm going to say no. The fact that you had one owner having 2 vessels, he could share that one berth. They could swap it out. He could it's his business. He could have, people traipsing over one boat to get to the other. But you can't have 2 different owners. That's not going to work. So at that berth, I said to Ray, I go, well, why don't you move the Swift out to there, one boat, Now, the mistress berth is open. So, you know, we could in the future,
Gone.
mistress is gone. I call it the mistress berth, but she was there for so many years. Now, for this summer, I'm going to rent that out as duck space, and only because that happened, this other deal with the Mercantile leaving is so late in the game. He's still there. He's going to leave like in a month. Or great guy named Bob. Go down there and meet him. He bought it. He's bringing it to the Great Lakes. He's a fantastic gentleman. But anyway, the select board will have to make. We'll talk about it with maybe your advice on what we think. Do we want to try to invite another Windjammer to take the mistress berth? You know, right now I have to say I'm gonna rent it out nightly and make a lot of money. So, but you might want to say, I mean, to be totally honest, we do have a letter on record to the town manager and me and the select board from Becky, who owns the Louis R. French. Ray sold the mistress, it went, and then it went up for sale again, and she bought it, and she's restoring it. And she has written a letter saying she would really love to have it back at home where she belongs, and she wants to bring it back there. She's requested that. I think it's a good idea myself. That's where she's been for so long. I don't know how we want to deal with that. Other people are going to probably want that as well. So that's coming. Some decisions to be made.
Okay. I'm looking here in my ordinance.
Basically, the ordinance is written that the select board on a year-to-year basis, or now it's a 3-year basis, may elect to rent a berth, and then it'll say where the berths are, the 3 at the head of the harbor, and then at the end of the most easterly part of the town docks, they may elect to rent that as a Windjammer berth. Pretty basic, pretty simple. So the select board would have to say, yeah, if someone wants to come in, we want to give it, and it says that the town can enter into a contract that's less than market value because of the other values that the Windjammers bring to the town. And it's worded something like that.
Elliot, just to let you know, I'm out of here at 10.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mark. Okay, very good. Is that it for the harbor master?
That's it.
today?
Yep. And I've got a meeting I got to go to about a guy with a mooring. So
Okay.
I'll take
Thank
leave,
you.
and thank you guys.
Next item on our agenda is our feature presentation. Today, we are honored to have Island Institute visiting with us, Leah Morris and Phoebe Walsh. And do you have some digital,
Would it be easier for them off a laptop or a thumb drive?
share that with Janice?
There should be.
Go ahead there, and maybe we'll get another microphone for you.
You can have one.
We have one here. Either one of those. Maybe I'll scan here and advance slides.
Yeah, you can use this mouse.
Okay. I'll scan here. Sorry, I'm used to working on a Mac. I might need
It's
to
okay.
get back here. Why this?
Phoebe, I pulled this from my archives.
Oh,
This is
yeah.
from
That one.
September of last year. Story,
Okay, we'll
working waterfront.
yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit today, that story. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. So I'm Leah Morris. I'm a senior community development officer with the Island Institute. I've been with the organization for about 3 years.
born and raised on MDI in the boatyard. So a lot of the work and even listening to you all talk this morning takes me back to following my dad around to committee meetings and things like that. Phoebe, why don't you take a quick minute and introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Phoebe Walsh. I grew up in Yarmouth, Maine. I worked on the Mary Day in college for a summer, so it's fun to hear about sort of, she's still here. But yeah, I started at the Island Institute in January. I work with Leah on marine electrification. I have a background in aquaculture. I was an oyster farmer for a while. So this work is really exciting because we work with oyster farmers quite a bit, as you'll learn.
So obviously, we're here today to talk about,
Turn on your microphone,
oh,
please.
thank you, sorry. There we go. So we're obviously here today to talk a little bit about the Island Institute's work over about the last 3 years on electrifying Maine's working boats, so commercial vessels. And we're not talking ferries. We feel like that's in capable hands. We're talking smaller work boats and harbor crafts from harbor masters to aquaculture, but we'll get a little bit more into it. Island Institute. So why did the Island Institute decide to dig into electric boats? Part of this came out of some work that the Island Institute actually did with Luke's Lobster around their greenhouse gas emissions. And one of the big takeaways from that data and research was that the on-water transport and emissions for Luke's operations was by and far the largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. So kind of working backwards from there, well, okay, we're seeing that that's the case for a large lobster supplier kind of business here in the state of Maine. How might that extrapolate back to smaller workboats? So in January of 2022, we convened a small group of people we thought might be interested. Again, really diverse, everybody from folks in the Department of Marine Resources to some aquaculturists and different users. And these, again, were people that we knew were forward-thinking enough. Maybe they've heard a little bit about electric motors. Maybe they've seen small torpedoes in their harbors, things like that. And from that meeting, we had a pretty strong and resounding response of, yeah, go do your work, Island Institute, and come back and see what you can tell us about this technology. So our kind of two big drivers and the reason we decided to focus on this within this broader work around how do we make Maine's working coastline a little bit more resilient, emissions reductions, Maine's Climate Council and those efforts, and then also obviously business resilience. So we would argue that if you move towards electric, perhaps the initial upfront cost right now is a little bit more, but over the lifetime of the business, it is a tool for folks to be able to manage their bottom lines in a little bit more consistent way, perhaps not being attached to kind of global energy markets and fluctuations in fuel prices and things like that. And we'll talk a little bit more about our role with the Maine Climate Council in a little bit.
Great. So when looking at electric outboards, we want to match them up with use cases that make sense, especially for where the technology is right now, especially and with the battery technology. So we work with a variety of users, inshore aquaculture. So primarily that's oysters, kelp, mussels, scallops. We work with some harbor masters, not so much with the boats they might take offshore, but boats that they use around the harbor to do work, similar to how a boatyard might use boat to, tow boats, tow docks, move people, gear. There's a whole list. I won't list them all, but another one that is relevant to Camden is sailing programs, chase boats. We just funded a little outboard for the youth sailing program here. So, and pump out boats is a more recent one that's on our radar. They're, only going around the marina. Near, short, predictable distances is what we look for in the beginning stages with these users.
So, as I said, we've been doing this work for about 3 years, and we thought to be able to support small businesses and municipalities and other entities that are thinking about this, we better get a handle on what the industry itself looks like. So that meant kind of trips to places like the Miami Boat Show to go in and talk with the major engine manufacturers where there's a little bit of traction. You know, Mercury and Yamaha and some of the other folks are starting to play in the space. But we were looking for horsepower that's a little more performance, a little more to it. So, you know, 40 and up, which then led us to start exploring other companies sort of what, you know, in the startup space. And as you can see, although Elco is not a startup, Elco has been around since 1893. And Phoebe will talk a little bit more about a project where we placed an Elco motor in a different sailing program a little bit down the coast last summer. So spending a lot of time in conversations with the other folks like Flux Marine, which is based in Bristol, Rhode Island. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that. There is a boat with a 40 horsepower Flux motor. And we can, again, talk about trying to get anybody here that might be interested out on a ride on that this summer. E-Propulsion is another company. They are Chinese manufactured motors, but they have been around a long time and have pretty solid technical assistance and support. And then Photon Marine is another really interesting startup in Portland, Oregon, who is not quite as far along in production, but they are entering this space specifically thinking about commercial workboats. So they're working with OEMs out there, placing their motors on workboats. They've done a really interesting pilot project where they put a couple of their boats with the New York Power Authority last year. So they've been testing the technology with success. So, and that's just to say that there are, again, there seems to be a small suite of startups. And again, Flux is the farthest along and kind of what I would say at production scale. We're not talking mass production, but we're talking a level of scale where perhaps if you order a motor, you're going to be able to get it within a reasonable time. We're not talking weeks, but months perhaps with a company like Flux. So early stages, rapidly evolving. As I said, most of the major engine manufacturers, I think, are watching the startup space. And I'm sure Flux and maybe some of these other outfits will ultimately get purchased by these large engine manufacturers. And I think another important piece that we felt as we're thinking about how do we, I call it like set the table here in Maine for this technology to take off, was spending time in boat yards, talking to people who are doing conversions, building kit boats like the Solar Sals that Elliot introduced us to, other boat yards, Classic Boat Yard on MDI. I mean, a lot of these boat yards have been quietly doing conversions in the recreational space for a long time. So there's a real brain trust in the state about how to work with electric motors. So just an interesting resource to tap into as we think about moving forward.
So when you say on that screen about
Yeah.
the mainstream manufacturers, small horsepower, what does that actually mean for horsepower?
That's, 20 and under, 17. I mean, Elliot, what's your little Torqeedo, right? Didn't you say you have a little 3? I mean, we're talking very small, and often ones right now you can kind of pull the battery pack and take it home and charge it versus, again, something like a 40 horsepower where you're going to need to be able to trickle charge it overnight on a 110 or, if you had a faster charger to be able to do it more quickly. Oh, is it going? So I've already talked a little bit about the building the partnerships. And again, I think we see that as like, again, municipalities perhaps and small businesses don't necessarily have the time. Like, oh, maybe I've heard about electric motors and thinking about it as a tool for business resilience and emissions reduction sounds great, but I'm trying to run my business or I'm trying to run my town. So again, we sort of feel like we're playing that intermediary role to kind of cut through what the industry looks like and how we might be able to make connections and partnerships to help people make the transition. We've spent a lot of time, that list that Phoebe started to talk about of the potential users. So really trying to get a handle on what each use case looks like. And again, okay, right now it makes sense for aquaculture no, it doesn't make sense for Department of Marine Resources patrol vessels. So again, just spending time understanding how various users use their fleet and looking for those opportunities where it makes sense right now. We've gotten over $600,000 in grant funding. The biggest nod was $500,000 from the Maine Technical Institute. And so we're working through kind of the deliverables on that, but that was a big nod from the state. We've spent a lot of time, meeting with folks, everything from the U.S. Department of Ag to Angus King and others to kind of build the conversation around electric marine propulsion as a tool, again, for commercial users in the state. We'll talk a little bit more about kind of the workforce component of this, and then launching a great workboat. Again, we'll save that for a little bit later. So we'll keep moving. But and then here on the right, you can just see a variety. There's the old Elco in the lower left. Again, the company's been around since 1893. Upper right-hand corner is a flux motor. And then you can see those little ones in the upper left are actually the Mercury suite of motors from the Miami Boat Show. And then in the lower right is a Photon 100 horsepower electric outboard.
So I don't know how you rate this, but those engines, how do their manufacturers tell you how long they'll last?
So
Not
yeah, yeah.
how long they'll last on a charge.
The range question, yeah, which we hear a lot. And so it's always that question of, it depends how far and how fast you want to go. So that goes back to this sort of use case. So depending on the number of batteries, if you buy one battery pack, you can go X distance. If you have two, again, that's where we're trying to. We don't want to set up an aquaculturist to buy a motor with one battery pack and then have it obviously not perform for them. So we work kind of making sure that when somebody makes the decision, like Gabe at Pendleton Yacht Yard, that he had the appropriate battery pack to be able to run. So at full throttle with his 40 horsepower motor, I think he can get just over an hour, but he doesn't go per pack. And he has one currently. But again, he doesn't use his motor that way. He's not, that's just not the use case for how Gabe goes about using his boat. So it really is a case by case basis. So I wish there was a more standardized answer, but there's not. Yes.
So how big is a battery pack?
We've got pictures. I didn't think to put one,
Yeah.
It varies.
Yeah, I mean, again, yeah.
The other
It's,
question is, how far could you carry a battery pack?
Yeah, that's a good-
That's
yeah.
where I'm going with
Yep.
it. I mean, if you're on a mooring.
yes, yeah, that's why, again, where we're seating these motors currently are where people have shoreside charging, but we haven't gotten to the barrier side yet. So we're in the process of assessing access to charging. So if you hold and pause, we'll get to it. It's great questions. Phoebe, do you want to talk a little bit about the?
Yeah, so Elliot handed me this before we started, which talks about our demonstration boat that Island Institute launched last summer with Pendleton Yacht Yard in collaboration with Flux Marine and Maine Electric Boat. It's a high field 13-foot rigid inflatable with a 40 horsepower equivalent Flux motor. And this was a really important project to explore the successes and barriers of this technology on the working waterfront. And it's been a great way for Gabe Pendleton of PYY to have access to an electric boat while also providing us really important data. So he's collecting data on energy use and cost for charging, as well as fuel use of an equivalent boat, and maintenance costs associated with that with the electric boat, as well as sort of an equivalent cost associated with similar 40 horsepower ICE motors. This project was important because it's the whole idea of seeing is believing. We wanted people, and we continue to want people, to go out on this boat, go for a ride, see that the technology exists, how it works, and And then, yeah, and how like it could be applicable in the workboat and the boatyard space.
Phoebe, are you able to describe the charging arrangement at Pendleton?
I'm not, because I haven't seen it,
Just
but
seen it yet. So Gabe had, one of the reasons we ended up, again, going with Gabe, partly, PYY sort of walks the walk. He's got solar, he's got the electric cars. It kind of fits in his business model. But he also has the pedestal right there on his dock. So he can plug it in at night and have the boat ready to go in the morning for he and his staff. So
What is the cost of a 40 horsepower?
So this demonstration boat all in for a brand new rib with the motor and the battery pack was $40,000. So the motor itself, generally the price point, and the price point is coming down, is it's slightly more than a traditional ICE engine. The challenge and the cost comes with the battery packs. So kind of the way we talk about it and think about it is, yes, perhaps you're spending more on the battery packs up front, but you're not buying fuel. You're having less days off the water. You're having less repairs because the motors are much more efficient than a traditional, spark plugs and wrenches and, going down and hoping it starts. So they're very reliable. But again, it's the upfront cost of basically purchasing your fuel on the front end.
Just saying that, unfortunately, due to another commitment.
Yeah.
I'm going to see the rest of this on video.
Okay, great. Well, appreciate it. And let's see if we can get this to play. So maybe this will entice some of you folks. So here's Gabe. Again, just to give you a taste, these boats perform, they get on plane almost instantaneously. Actually, it can be a little surprising to people how quickly you are on plane. But again, just to give you a taste of the boat in action. And I know Gabe would be, happy to talk with anybody at any time about his experience. He's been a great partner in kind of the data collection, both quantitative, but also the qualitative experience.
I took a ride in Rockland Harbor last year, and it's a nice ride.
Yes.
Are they quieter?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can
Quieter?
be having,
The
it's-
sound of the water is all that you have.
yeah, it really, it's quite something.
and that instant torque is something, I don't know if you experience that, but I see that as being helpful if you're trying to move, if you're towing a boat on the hip and you're trying to you got to get some power real quick.
So kind of stepping back for a minute, as we were thinking about how the Island Institute, again, I go back to this setting the table so that the technology can kind of take hold here. We thought it was really important to kind of think about the workforce. So we're saying we want to bring these motors to Maine. Who's going to install them? Who's going to maintain them? Who's going to sell them? So we worked with the Maine Community College system over the last 2.5 years and developed a level 1 short course, which you can go and take on the Island Institute website, and you get a digital badge from the Maine Community College system saying you have a basic knowledge of electric motors. The kind of more exciting to me is this level 2, which we are launching this summer, and I've got a couple of flyers I can leave behind. We are enrolling now a free course. It's a 2-day kind of boot camp style, where being hosted by 2 faculty from the Midcoast School of Technology, who have been phenomenal partners in this. So we've developed the content, and they've purchased a small rib, and we have a bunch of donated motors from Maine Electric Boat, which is another partner we've worked with a little bit, based out in Biddeford. So it will be a hands-on course, and when people complete it, they will have a digital badge from the community college system saying, I know how to work on electric motors. This first cohort, we are trying to really focus on marine service providers and boatyard technicians. So people who are already in the space that maybe know a little bit about it or are starting to see more motors come through their doors. So we're trying to kind of upskill folks that are already in the marine service space.
And where in Rockland is that held?
So that will be at the Midcoast School of Technology. And then the Farmington one is at the Foster CTE Center. And then they will do a third location likely at Washington Community College, either in the fall or early winter. And again, this will be a pilot, like let's see how this goes, and then assess and possibly think about how do we package this content. We've had conversations with the ABYC who are really interested. They actually are like, wow, you guys are thinking about this. We haven't touched it yet. We've been kind of watching it. So we've been talking with them about how we might add their certification to the course as we move forward.
All right. So one of our main financing tools for helping people access these motors that cost quite a bit up front are our Spark grants. These are smaller grants that we use to de-risk the adoption. These are different partners that we have provided grants for over the years for electric motors. You'll see under this past year, Camden Area Youth Seamanship Program, they applied for a small motor for the chase boat, and they haven't purchased that yet, but I'm excited to see how that goes. And last year, we provided a 20 horsepower equivalent outboard, Elco outboard, to the apprentice shop in Rockland. I'm excited to go out on a ride on that this afternoon. I haven't actually been out on an electric boat yet, which is sad. So, yeah.
So the Camden area program, is that the yacht club? And they're getting one motor?
Yeah, it's a nonprofit part of the yacht club, I believe, that low or no cost sailing program. And yes, they're looking at they had a couple options. I still haven't heard what they decided on for the actual motor, but something around the 6 horsepower, very small. So just probably to get out to their boats. I said chase boat, but I think I was confusing that with the apprentice shop.
Good.
Yeah. We also use Spark grants to support electrification efforts more broadly. So a lot of that is solar. These are our fiscal year 22 and 23 list of a lot of solar projects. But if you want to go to the next slide, I have this past year's. Putting solar on oyster farms has been a really fun project, especially for me with my background in aquaculture, because it powers their equipment without the need for generators, which is great for fuel and emissions, but also makes for a quieter work environment for neighbors and for themselves. And other electrification efforts are like replacing gasoline or diesel powered hydraulic power packs with electric. So Casco Bay Mooring in Yarmouth has a kelp and mooring line hauler that is now electric.
And one thing I'll add, which gets a little bit at this charging question, because I think when we think about the gold standard sort of in the future, it's sort of a closed loop where somebody pulls up their boat, and wouldn't it be great if it's charging off of solar instead of the electrical grid, more broadly speaking. So we are in the process of giving some grant funding to a small project that will be sort of a demonstration space at a boatyard, again, a little up the coast this time. So that will be a neat project to be talking about in 6 months or so. But again, they will have an electric motor and it will charge off their solar panels on their dock. So challenges. Again, sort of, I think the biggest one, you can see this list here is around charging and the shoreside infrastructure access. So we are working with some consultants and have been for the last 3 months or so, trying to get at kind of what is the landscape? How does it exist now in public and private spaces, marinas across the coast? We started that conversation in Machias, hit Ellsworth, Rockland, and then down to Portland to have roundtables and, inviting local businesses that are interested and or regional planning agencies, et cetera, to have the conversation around this is what we are trying to explore in shoreside charging, and kind of collected those conversations. And then there has been a broad suite of interviews also within the fishery, which I haven't talked much about yet, and I'll wait to a future slide, because really we're here today talking specifically about the outboard work that we've done, because that's where we have leaned in the most to this point. We are starting to do some data collection and think about data collection for inboard motors. So thinking about the lobster fishery or smaller transportation sector. Fogg's taxi service on Casco Bay is always a good example. Dennis has 7 boats and he would love to electrify them all, primarily for his bottom line. He knows that it will be good for his business, but it's getting the charging infrastructure and having access to the appropriate amount of power running into the shore.
So is the charging infrastructure for these motors, is it literally you can buy the Tesla or the other versions of car stuff, or they have to invent their own charging technology and connections, et cetera?
So it's a combination. And I realize I'm thinking we should have put a slide in around. So again, a low horsepower motor, even Gabe with that 40 horsepower, he could trickle charge his motor overnight with some extension cords running down the dock. Not ideal, but he could do it. It would take a long time. Maybe he wouldn't have a full battery charge when he headed out to do his work for the day, but maybe he could get enough of the work done at a low horsepower that would be okay. Through this project that we are doing on the shoreside infrastructure, we feel like it's the level 2 charger. So if anybody here has an electric vehicle in their home, a 220 volt, washer, what you plug your washer dryer into, is probably where we're going to need to put in resources and encourage agencies to invest if we really want, again, this technology to be able to take off. And then there's level 3 charging, which is the Tesla chargers. That's what Casco Bay Ferry, this high hundreds of thousands of dollars to install, and, high voltage, quick turnaround. The 220, we're talking hundreds of dollars, maybe $1,000. And to get more at your question around what does the supply chain look like, there is one company currently right now that seems to be making inroads sort of for marine side charging infrastructure, and that's called Aqua Superpower. They will be placing 2 charging pedestals, kind of level 2 pedestals in Casco Bay, one in Freeport and one somewhere farther down on one of the piers in Portland, not quite sure, or possibly South Portland. I believe, and those are being funded by Department of Energy money, and the idea is to kind of assess the usage, understand.
How long does it take the level 2 to charge Gabe's 40 horsepower?
That would be, that's a great question. I would
3 to 9 hours.
Yeah.
That would
3
depend on the
hours?
batteries.
Yeah. So there's, yeah.
Have a cup of coffee and your engine's charged.
That would be the super fast. That would be the
Yeah, that would be at
three-phase.
the level 300,000s, hundreds of thousands.
But
Yeah.
you've tried it overnight. Could I add also? I
Yeah,
think it's true that what's the difference? I guess is a question between just like the level 2 charging kind of thing that you have to purchase, the $500, $1,000 thing, versus just plugging in 220 shore power.
Yeah.
That marinas have when
Yes,
you plug in.
exactly. You can,
You can do
Yes.
that. Yeah.
They are the equivalent.
yes, as I understand. I am not, a shoreside charging expert. I am, but yes, that's my understanding. Did you have a question, sir? Or did you
Just
get?
answer.
Okay, great. So kind of back to the shoreside infrastructure. So we'll have a couple of pedestals for commercial access in Casco Bay. It'll be really interesting to see how those work out. And when we finish this project, we're going to kind of have a roadmap. It will have a really robust GIS component. So you all, as the Camden Harbor Committee, will be able to look at this, online GIS work to see kind of where does Camden stand in terms of access for charging. Again, you probably already know that, but to have it in the context of a conversation around trying to bring more electrified commercial craft or recreational boats. So that will be coming in the next month or so. And then we hope to use that to kind of work with state agencies, which I'll talk about in a little bit. I think the other big thing, just to put a small note on, that is a challenge, and I think we've touched on it, is this sort of use case by use case. So we're trying to collect data. So we have deployed these things, baseline usage. They're basically duty cycle monitors for electric engines. And we've got them on 14 different boats currently. We've got another handful to deploy. And the idea is to help us capture how people currently use their engines. And so that helps inform the motor manufacturers that are designing electric motors to design their product better, but also, again, to help us match folks and help any commercial user think about, okay, I want to make the conversion. How much horsepower do I actually need? How many battery packs? So we're trying to get the data behind that so that people can make informed decisions, not just because right now you can't walk into, I don't know, Hamlin Marine and buy a 40 or 100 horsepower off the shelf and just plop it in. We are on the front edge of this, and it takes kind of care and data to be able to make a good choice for any commercial user at this point. So I talked a little bit about the data collection. A big, exciting development for us and ultimately for the future of electric boats in Maine is that Efficiency Maine Trust, which is a quasi-state agency, which people may know of from the mini splits in our homes and all the rebate programs, heat pumps, sorry, sometimes I call them mini splits. Efficiency Maine Trust has launched, a very successful model and program with heat pumps. We are now beginning a pilot project with them around electric outboards, possibly inboards. This will be data collection and analysis. And the goal ultimately will be to get at tax rebates and incentives to get, again, people to think about adopting the technology with the greatest, what's the word I'm looking for? It's sort of emissions reduction and the lowest cost to any potential adopter of the motors. We talked with Efficiency Maine Trust a couple of years ago, and they said, I don't know why you're thinking about electric outboards or even electric propulsion. And in the last few months, they're hearing a lot of chatter from the Maine Climate Council. And so surfaced back with us and said, hey, let's work on a pilot project together. So we have not designed that project. We're in conversations. It should be really interesting as we move forward. We've talked about Spark grants. We've talked about most of the things on here. So ultimately, yeah.
Seemingly, we talk about brand new motor, how does it perform, how do you charge it? But marine environments are not nice to electricity. So the battery packs and stuff, do we have any sort of data that you buy a battery pack and you can expect to get 5 years out of it, 25 years out of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Flux, I know, as our kind of motor manufacturer with the PYY boat, has that. And, at this point it's all speculation. I mean, their motors have not been on the water for 20 years. I've seen the motors and the battery packs. I mean, they're, I would say, sort of the engineering and design behind sealing them from the elements and things like that is nothing like I've ever seen with my motor on the back of my Boston Whaler, which is anyway. So I think obviously with electricity and water, the standards and any given company, there are not necessarily ABYC standards or other standards driving it, but they're trying to put a market, they're trying to drive their bottom business line. And if they had things catching fire or corrosing with salt water, that's not going to benefit them well. So my answer, I guess, is at this point, it's anecdotal because, again, these motors have not been on the water for a long time. But from what I see and others see, I mean, they are putting a lot of thought and effort into how do we contain the parts of the motor and or the batteries so that they are not vulnerable. And Gabe, it will be interesting. The boat was overwintered and went down to Bristol, Rhode Island, where Flux is. The boat, I think, is getting back this week or next week. And so kind of, he didn't store it over the winter. But as we understand, again, it has had no deleterious effect on the range and ability to charge the battery.
Just because you mentioned winter, I also want to add a lot of users are interested in their performance through the winter in terms of battery life. And so that's something that we'll gather data on as well as they're great in the summer, but how do they work in January?
And, and not to say, maybe this is, we know a couple of entities in Alaska that are running these motors in all seasons, and, they've got some pretty rugged winters. So again, I think at this point in time, the community is small, but we're all sharing information and kind of knowledge as we think about it. So, again, really, we're thinking about how do we help marine businesses and municipalities kind of be the cleanest, greenest.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Yep.
I'll watch it online.
Yeah, great. And most resilient kind of in the country. So again, the Island Institute is one of a small group of people across the country that are really thinking about electric outboards as a tool for business resilience and emissions reductions. So.
Just for more information, my email, and we have flyers, but pwalsh@islandinstitute.org is my email, or sparkgrants@islandinstitute.org. If you're interested, we also have flyers, like I said, but QR code to our electric motor, our technician course, information on our Spark Grants. We're going to be doing some sea trials this summer. I don't have a date yet for when we're going to do sort of community ones, but if you're interested in going out on Gabe's boat, send me an email and I'll get you more information. Oh, and I will say we also have a Google group that is sort of a community of people interested in this. It's called Electric Marine Propulsion in Maine and Beyond. It's a good place to ask questions, share information, share interesting stories.
Where is that? Electric Marine Propulsion in Maine.
It's a long
Email
name.
Phoebe.
Email me and I will get you connected. And there's our contact information up there.
So where's that photo? Not your photo, the land photo.
Where is that? That's one that Island Institute
Yeah,
uses a lot.
that's a great question. Do you know?
I don't know. I'm sorry. We sort of took it could be. Yeah.
Might be. We have a great photographer on staff. Yeah, Elliot.
Can you probably this will be a review, describe funding programs for municipalities? For example, say Camden was interested in acquiring an electric motor for one of its harbor boats.
Yeah. Yep.
Are there funding?
So currently, I would say there are no statewide programs. As I understand it, there's the Community Resilience Partnership, but does Camden qualify
Yeah,
for CRP funds?
We've gotten 3, so we're
Yeah.
actually out right now.
Yeah, okay.
Not letting us submit
Yeah.
for more
Okay.
at the present time.
So right
Used them
now,
up.
that is the only avenue I know sort of for state funding. Electric boats were added to the list of available projects last spring.
Interesting to see what Efficiency Maine does.
Yes,
What they do.
agreed.
Yeah,
So-
I could see that being on a consumer level, like heat pumps for your home.
Hey, guys, whoever's talking in the room, we can't hear you.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, so I think, so to your question, Elliot, though, and agreed, like the Efficiency Maine Trust, that traction feels like a momentous, it will begin to bring about a shift in terms of hopefully being able to access funding streams. And that's for thinking about the motors and the battery packs, those systems. And then as we finish the shoreside charging kind of project with our consultant, we're hoping that that helps us begin to think about and leverage either federal, likely some federal funding to be able to help, kind of shore up the charging infrastructure. Because even though we talked about a lot of marinas having level 2 pedestals, there are a lot that don't. So that I see it as sort of different pots of money, right? So money to be able to underwrite an electric boat and motor versus how do we get the charging infrastructure that matches the use cases either in harbors or down rural peninsulas and different parts of the state. So,
And
yeah.
I was going to say, it's not a huge grant, but municipalities are considered with Spark grants.
Yes.
They are eligible, so
Yep.
you should apply if you're interested.
So I would say the Island Institute right now is sort of trying to plug the hole, if that's an appropriate term here, but to provide the financial support and assistance we can to kind of continue to get some motors across the coast so people can continue to see and believe. And again, we're trying to make sure that as we do that with our grant funding, we're getting it across different geographies in the state, and then also in different kinds of use cases. So again, the Gabe's was not a Spark grant, it was a different financial model. But obviously that use case is a boatyard. So again, now we're starting to try and think about how might we get one in the space of an aquaculture business, and kind of again moving around, whether we're talking again to harbor masters, or we've got word that there have been a couple of federally funded pump out boats that are fully electric and charged with solar. So maybe think the solar sow. So there is no clear answer to that, and there's no golden pot of money, but you knew that.
And who administers the Spark grants?
I oversee that. Yeah. So, and we have a review committee, and Leah is on that. Yeah, I oversee that.
Uh-huh.
And I have flyers with more information that I will leave.
Are you able to attach a dollar value to the 100 horsepower Photon that was in one of the early images?
No. I talk with Photon probably once a month, and they are at the point. So I've had the opportunity to be on one of their boats twice. So again, these are sort of beta model motors. I don't know where they have set on price point currently. So I don't want to give an answer. It's an answer I could easily get if you're thinking about something like a Photon. And that's what I was going to say. So one of the reasons we ended up going with Flux, as I said, they're much farther along towards production scale. Flux will be turning out, I think it's 75 motors this year, something like that. Maybe it's a little more. Photon is aiming for 15 and hoping to get 10 out the door this year. So again, raising capital, kind of doing that iterative process as a startup. So that is an answer I could get for you. And again, I've been on the Photon boats. It's unbelievable. So it's not much, it's no different than being on the Flux boat, but I was on a Photon boat with 2 100 horsepowers on the back of it. And the performance is pretty amazing. So if that's something you're interested in, we can talk about it. We are continuing conversations with them because I would really like to see us get a Photon motor somewhere on the coast of Maine. But as you know, as a nonprofit, it's like sort of threading, even for us, how do we thread together the capital to get one of their motors here and make that work? And one of their models is also thinking about deploying their motors more as a fleet. So like I mentioned, they did a pilot project with the New York State Power Authority. If and when Photon proceeds with a full sell to them, that's 10 motors going to an outfit. So that's a little bit how they are approaching sort of their business model versus the one-off motors. That said, they continue to see the stuff that we're doing here in Maine, and are, again, we keep exploring how we might get a Photon motor somewhere along the coast of Maine. So as you can see, we're up to a lot of different, it's like, again, how it's expanding the interest and knowledge around electric motors, it's developing the workforce, and then it's trying to solve on the shoreside charging. Kind of what is the infrastructure that we need? What is the workforce that we need? And at the same time, how do we expose people to the technology to get them excited and thinking about it? So
I think your shoreside charging is, I don't know, the right analogy, but it's, until you get that,
Mm.
you don't got.
Yeah. Yep.
It can be great, you can see the pictures and you can hear the description of how the boat feels.
Yep.
But right now, unless I was like a boatyard where you had
Yeah.
something you can plug in and charge it overnight, the idea of sort of ordinary people,
Mhm.
it's just an insurmountable.
Yeah, that's why we're doing a lot of individual, like working case by case. For example, I'm working with an oyster farmer / hatchery owner who's potentially interested in the 100 horsepower flux. And he's a very specific use case where he's only using his boat every other day. He's trailering it. So his plan, if he gets it, is to charge it at his facility. And so at this point before, like we have to work on every level at the same time so that when they're all ready at the same time. And so, yeah, it is working with specific.
It's aiming to sell multiple motors to a user.
Mhm.
Well, that makes sense because then you're charging for
Yeah.
such a cost.
Yep. Exactly.
It's worth
The return on investment. Yeah. Understood. Yep. Appreciate the time.
Okay. All
What's the
right,
date of our next meeting, the 18th?
18.
Thank you.
And our whole job, or so much of our job, is helping find answers for things. So if you ever have questions, let us know and we'll help.
Okay. All right, well, that was very informative.
Absolutely.
Well, hopefully, so, as I said, we've got our fingers in a lot of the pieces of the puzzle. So sometimes, we've got it all covered, but it sometimes, even when I'm talking about it, feels like a lot. So
It's a lot.
yes, it is.
And I'll make sure, I'll keep you in the loop on the Camden Youth Seamanship Program, their
Oh,
outboard.
I'll look forward to
I'll let
seeing
you
that.
know when it's on the water and you can,
Not hearing it, but seeing it.
yeah.
Right.
Great.
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah, and definitely trying to get a ride on Gabe's boat. I know you did, Elliot.
Yeah, I did that. Does he ever come over and bring it over here?
I think the idea this year was to try and do a couple of sea trial days in Lincolnville so that he's
Right across.
right, just right there. And then we sign people up, and get a half-hour slot and kind of try and move as many people through as possible. So
Okay,
that's-
Lincolnville.
on some dates.
Sea trial, take charge.
Yeah, and it's exciting. The boat will be, I think, going up. The National Renewable Energy Lab is doing a big meeting up at the College of the Atlantic. So we're going to take the boat up there and get all those folks out on it. So hoping to get Angus King and others out on the boat. So we're going to have a busy summer. Yes.
Okay. Well,
Thank
thank
you
you
so much.
both for visiting with us today.
Appreciate it.
And hopefully we'll get a takeaway that we use.
Yeah.
Take advantage of.
Well, and once we have this, I think we all have kind of the assumptions of what we think the shoreside analysis. So, I didn't talk about that. So we got the entire state of Maine's boat registration data. So it's like 122,000 boats.